Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we continue on with our new segment, A Day, where we are going to be previewing different season breakdowns. And today we are going to be talking about the Miami Dolphins and what lies ahead for them in the 2024-25 season. When you talk about the Dolphins, obviously the idea is that they are capable of being a championship contending team, but the biggest question marks, I feel at least, lie with quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, who had a career year last season. In 2023. He set career highs in a number of important marks. He led the NFL in passing yards with 4,624 yards. He threw for 29 touchdowns, and something that was pretty important for him was the fact that he played in all 17 games. A lot of people had concerns with him coming out of a 2022 season where he was looked into for concussions at least twice. It could have been 3 times, but Tua even talked about the fact that retirement did at least cross his mind, and that is something that is really concerning to hear from somebody who is just coming out of his rookie deal. He's on the final year of his contract this season. So it doesn't seem like he is going to be signing a long-term deal with the Dolphins this season, but he could be putting himself in for a payday if he does perform again this season. And again, I think that the fact that he played in every single game this past year does at least put, to some degree, I know he came into the NFL with a nagging injury as well, but ultimately my concern with him isn't the health, it is the ability, and he has done an incredible job. I mean, you look at the numbers that are currently on the screen, he did a very good job from a production standpoint last year, but one of the realities of the situation, and it's somewhat similar to the Brock Purdy conversation, is that I feel like a lot of different quarterbacks could have success in this Miami situation, and that Tua is a little bit of a product of where he is. And Tua, there was real promise with him coming out of Alabama, the way that he was able to step in for Jalen Hurts when Hurts was underperforming and turn the team around. Obviously Hurts takes over at the end of that run, but Tua is somebody who legitimately earned that high overall draft selection and earned the benefit of the doubt for a bit there, but I don't know if it's necessarily translated to the NFL. And again, the numbers would disagree with me there, so there might be people in the comments section who are killing me for not being a Tua believer, but I just don't know if I ever see him being somebody at the end of a game that you feel super confident in his ability to overcome the odds. And I saw Will Levis outperform him in a primetime game in a crunch time situation with a worse offense than, and I know that Tyreek was dealing with some injuries during that game as well, so I want to throw that out there, but either way, I stand by what I said. And you look at the overall offense that is being run in Miami right now. Mike McDaniel has been a revelation for this Dolphins team, and he has been sort of transforming the game around him. It's one of the best offensive schemes in the NFL. The way that they have all of these pre-snap motions and the just ability to find all of these diamond in the rough players that can just flat out run. Now, it was obviously a big swing for Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle was also a first-round selection, so it's not like they're making total magic happen in terms of how they, where these players are coming from necessarily. But you look at their run game and the way that has been not just one of the fastest backfield duos in Raheem Mostert and Devin Achane, but I think that ultimately, the way that you see the different schemes they run in terms of the zone runs, and everybody's just always moving. It's keeping the defense on their toes, and ultimately we just see so much speed all over the place that it is a very dangerous offense. And to Tua's credit, he is able to capitalize on the situations where he is kind of feeding the whole family, everybody's getting involved. Obviously, anytime he underthrows Tyreek Hill, people who are not Tua people will tweet it out at him. I think that that's a little bit extreme, and it's hard to keep up with Tyreek Hill sometimes. But it is something where, I have my doubts with Tua, and I don't know if that's something that is going to turn around. Now, I can be proven wrong, and I would be happy to at this point, but I just think that Mike McDaniel is kind of the star of that offense, even more so than Tua is. And I'll be very curious to see, like I mentioned, it doesn't seem like they're going to be coming to a contract agreement this offseason, and we'll see what the long-term future of Tua in Miami looks like. But looking at the defensive side of the ball, they lost a key player this offseason in Christian Wilkins, who I don't think gets enough credit for the impact that he has on games. Something to monitor is the fact that he did just have a career high in sacks in a contract year. He doubled his career high. It was 4.5 previously a few years ago. This past year he had 9. But I think it's way more than that. Now, they used him as more of a pass rusher this past season, and he converted on that, but he's been one of the best run stuffers in the game as well. Now, his overall tackle numbers were down this year pretty significantly, 65 total tackles, which is the lowest in a season that he has had since 2020. But I do believe that this is a legitimate loss for them up front and somebody that's been a leader of their defense. But they've made their share of moves as well to round out the roster. Benito Jones is somebody to look at. You're not going to be able to entirely make up the production of Christian Wilkins, but somebody they signed from the Lions last year who was a consistent starter for them and filled the middle a little bit more. But when you look at this defense and what they have, when fully healthy, they were one of the best pass rushes in the NFL last season. They had Wilkins, they had Andrew Van Ginkel, who they did also lose in the offseason, signed with the Minnesota Vikings. But Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips are an absolutely electrifying duo when healthy. I do have some injury concerns with Bradley Chubb. Jalen Phillips last year I thought was a little bit more of an aberration, but Zach Sealer as well from the D-line gave him a career season with 10 sacks there. They're adding a couple other players. You look at Chop Robinson, who they selected in the first round. Sneaky signing of Calais Campbell as well, who is going to be 38 years old next season, but had 6.5 sacks last year for Atlanta and is just a good veteran presence, another body, because you saw by the playoffs this Dolphins team was just riddled with injuries, and it was really difficult for them to keep up with it. They were playing a Melvin Ingram who is just so far past his prime, and not just that they had him on the line, but they had him in coverage as well, not to send an unnecessary shot at Melvin Ingram by any means, but it was pretty rough stuff with that defense. That was a lot better than the version that you saw in the postseason. A lot of people are really high on their secondary. I'm not quite as high. Now, Jalen Ramsey was dealing with injuries last season. I think that he is still not too far removed from a few All-Pro selections, most recently in the 2021-22 season. So he's an impact guy when he's out there for him. No, he's probably not going to give you all-pro impact, but at least is somebody who is an experienced player that you can go out and trust. They did release Xavier Howard, who was a longtime member of the Dolphins, but they brought in some vets in Jordan Poyer and Kendall Fuller as well to sort of shape up that secondary. And then the last signing that I did sneaky like for them was Jordan Brooks, a little bit underrated as well, played linebacker for the Seattle Seahawks and is now going to have an opportunity to be, a name on the Dolphins this upcoming year. Now, looking at their schedule as a whole, Sharp Football Analysis has the Dolphins with the 8th easiest schedule in the league. Their line is at 9.5 wins on the year for the over-under. Just some things that stood out to me in terms of their schedule. They have a couple difficult opponents in weeks 1 and 2 against the Jaguars and the Bills, but they do get those games at home, and if they are able to take care of business in weeks 1 and 2, week 2 is Thursday Night Football, I will add just for the sake of that, but if they're able to beat the Jaguars and the Bills, they can be looking at a nice string of wins to start the season leading into that bye week, maybe even a little bit extended as well, going into week 7 and 8 against the Colts on the road and the Cardinals at home. Again, not locking them into any one of these games necessarily, but there's definitely a realistic path for them to start 5-0, maybe even a little bit better there, coming out of that bye week, week 6. But the other part of the schedule I wanted to look at was the end, where you can see 4 out of their last 6 games are on the road against pretty intimidating opponents. It is at Green Bay in week 13, at Houston in week 15, at Cleveland in week 17, and at New York against the Jets in week 18. Also, you throw in some matchups against the Jets at home and the 49ers at home. That is a very tough stretch to end the season, in my opinion. So ultimately, when I went through, again, just gut reactions, win or a loss, I ended up with them being a 10-17. So just like yesterday with the Bills, I have the Dolphins very slightly over in this season. So they're going to be one of those teams that are hanging around playoff contention. I feel like they are going to. Now, I had the Bills at 11 wins yesterday, which would mean that I have the Bills winning that AFC North, which I do, or AFC East, I should say, which I do sort of stand by. I feel like a lot of people hopped off of the Bills earlier than they should have, but Dolphins absolutely have a case to be made for winning that division. So again, just reiterating, I have them at 10-7. They will be a playoff team, but again, story of the season is going to be, do you believe in the future of the Dolphins with Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback? But let me know whether or not you do believe in Tua and this Dolphins team and what your expectations are for both regular season and postseason success. But we are going to be taking our next break here. When we come back on the other side, we will be diving into last night's MLB Home Run Derby, which actually ended up being thrilling. There was some other events taking place as well that made it stand out, at least on social media, referring to a national anthem performance and overall just the state of where the MLB is at in terms of their all-star festivities in comparison to a pretty lackluster group of all-star weekends and events across American sports. So we're going to be diving into that, but first, a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.